Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to not only the Reinvention virtual chat, but also to the Power of Reinvention podcast. I am so excited to have you all here today. As many of you know, I wrote this wonderful book, Reinvent Your Life. What are you waiting for? And it came out right at the very beginning of the pandemic. Ironically, March 7th was my pub date. And little did I know that I would have to actually end up reinventing my entire book launch plan, and thus started the Reinvention virtual chat. If I couldn't go to the bookstores and go on book tour, I was going to bring the book tour to me and everybody that wanted to partake. And it turned out to be one of the most extraordinary things to create this online community over Zoom, which we were doing 3 times a week. Then we scaled it back to 2 times a week. We're now doing it once a month. And then a little over a year ago, I launched the Power of Reinvention podcast, which is a weekly podcast. And fortunately, I'm able to take some of my incredible guests on the Reinvention virtual chat and also share our conversation as part of our podcast. So welcome to all of you, whether you're on the Reinvention virtual chat today, whether you're on live Facebook, or whether you are listening through the Power of Reinvention podcast. I'd like to introduce my guest, Lisa Sun, who is the founder and CEO of GRAVITAS. Lisa, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome.
Thank you, Kathy. I feel like we've known each other for almost a decade, so it's really fun to have this format to interact.
I know, right? So I'm going to give a little background on who Lisa is for those who may not know. Fortunately for me, and I'll tell you anecdotally a little bit more, but she is the CEO of GRAVITAS, which is a company whose origin story dates back to Lisa's first professional review that she, quote, lacked gravitas and should go buy a new dress, big jewelry, and great shoes. Well, realizing the transformative power that clothing can have, Lisa secured the patent on building shapewear into dresses and launched GRAVITAS as a confidence company that offers innovative apparel and styling solutions designed to make over women from the inside out. Prior to founding GRAVITAS, and this is what I just love, is that Lisa spent 11 years at McKinsey & Company, where she advised leading luxury, fashion, and beauty brands globally on strategic and operational issues. Now, the mission of GRAVITAS is intelligent function meets versatile fashion. So since its Q4 2013 launch, GRAVITAS has garnered a loyal customer following and received over 80 press features, including stories in Oprah Magazine, W Magazine, Elle, New York Magazine, InStyle, Marie Claire, People, Cosmopolitan, WWD, Fast Company, Forbes, just to name a few, and features on the Today Show, CNN, and ABC News. Now, how many dress companies do you know that actually have that kind of presence? So I met Lisa, as she said, probably 10 years ago, maybe, through a mutual friend, our wonderful friend, Marcy Friedman. And the moment I met Lisa and all that she was doing, I was just blown away. As a female entrepreneur for 30 years myself, I had so much respect for what she was doing. I was so intrigued that she came out of this McKinsey consulting side of the business and had this incredible understanding of business and where and how to drive business. But that doesn't mean that it's that easy to have an idea and launch a company that is completely separate as an entrepreneur. So Lisa, I kind of want to take you back. I'm going to take you first before we go to that moment in your life. I kind of want to take you all the way back. I want to start with, who was little Lisa? And what was it when you were a young girl that inspired you? Where did you grow up? What were the things or the role models around you, or were there no role models around you? And share a little bit about what you thought you might be doing when you grow up.
Well, first of all, I'm honored to be on your podcast, Kathy. I'm so excited for everything you're doing and the way in which you've reinvented yourself. So this is phenomenal opportunity just to spend time with you and your team. And your team is phenomenal. Compliments to your whole team.
Right? They're the best.
Most organized, on top of things. Just I envy you.
Thank you.
So I always start my story by saying I grew up in the company of entrepreneurs. My parents are immigrants from Taiwan, from Kaohsiung, which is in the southern part of Taiwan, which most people don't know. Most people think Taipei. My
Yeah.
parents are from like where the farmers are. Okay,
Wow.
that is not the most metropolitan city in Taiwan, and they are Taiwanese. They are not part of the Kuomintang that went over in the 50s. So they are Taiwanese. They're the only two people to leave their families in Taiwan. My entire extended family stayed in Taiwan. And my parents, both college educated, came to the US with no money. In the 70s, my mom worked on a hamburger truck and my dad worked on a loading dock. And they went on to own multiple businesses. If anyone knows Genghis Khan Mongolian barbecue,
Oh,
4.95 at lunch,
yeah.
12.95 at dinner, all you can eat.
Yeah.
Started in Fontana, California, which most people know Rancho Cucamonga. Fontana is like the stepchild of Rancho Cucamonga in the Inland Empire. So I grew up in the middle of a desert in Southern California. Very lucky because I got to see firsthand what it means to build something from nothing. My parents literally came with nothing. And so growing up, I was the water girl in the restaurant. My parents had a scrap metal yard, and I remember doing my homework in the office while 80 workers, no one spoke English. Estoy aprendiendo español. I really saw firsthand what it took to build a business. So my first role models are certainly my parents, because they are tremendous entrepreneurs and incredibly supportive and caring parents. And so I was very lucky. By the way, there were probably a handful of Chinese people living in this town. If anyone knows the Inland Empire, it is not known for being, at least in the 80s and 90s, that diverse. It is much more diverse now. But at the time, we were certainly the outsiders. Luckily, I have a mother who turned the Mongolian barbecue on Sierra Boulevard next to the National Lumber Company into the unofficial meeting place in Fontana, California. Everyone thought of my mom as the unofficial mayor. So while we were outsiders, I think my mom's personality was such that she carried everyone's baby so they could eat their meal. Everyone catered from her restaurant. The local Kaiser Hospital doctors, they all went there at lunchtime. So I love that my mom turned this tiny little Mongolian barbecue into something that could compete with the Sizzler and the Claim Jumper in town.
I love that. Well, I want you to know that Madison, who is on here with us today, is actually from the Inland Empire and is probably
The
fully
IE.
appreciative of your comments.
The IE, right? Like, I mean, we had a ticker tape parade the day we got a Price Club, now known as Costco, a Walmart, and a Claim Jumper. And then there was like another parade the day we got a Barnes and Noble because it was open till 11. There was like, oh my God, this is amazing, right? If you're from the Inland Empire, you know that those are big milestones in your childhood.
That's amazing. So how did you go from that extraordinary, and I didn't realize when I asked you that question that there really was an incredible sort of stage that was being set for you on hard work and diligence and, really, that entrepreneurial spirit. I had no idea that that was sort of a part of your history. And I'm delighted to hear what you took away from that. And you may not have realized it at the time when you were a young girl, but certainly sort of hard work was in your bones, which is, I know, what you've done for most of your adult life. So where did you sort of go from there? Did you have big dreams at that point?
I skipped a few grades. So the thing that you have to understand about firstborn Asian immigrant children is that all of your parents' hopes and dreams and sense of accomplishment are placed on your shoulders. My younger brother certainly doesn't have that level of responsibility to bear, but it was sort of like you left your families behind. You're struggling every day to make ends meet. Like, why did you move to America? And so the greatest marker for success of why you left Taiwan would be your child going to an Ivy League school. And so when I was 15 years old, 1995, I really, by the way, we did not grow up wealthy, right? The vacation I had was the one day the restaurant closed, my parents drove to Vegas on Christmas Day. And we were in Vegas at the Excalibur or the Luxor or the Imperial Palace back before Vegas was a thing, right? We'd watch like Legends in concert and my mom would sit at the blackjack table. So, I had never been to the East Coast. I didn't even know what the Ivy League was, but my parents were like, your firstborn daughter, you've moved to America, you have to go to Harvard, Yale, or Princeton. And those were the choices. I didn't even know what that meant because, again, I was 15 years old when I applied to college. And I had an English teacher. Now, my high school, Etiwanda High School, was 10 years old at that point. My high school was so young, maybe 400 kids per class. No one had ever gotten to an Ivy League school. I don't think they even understood what it meant. I went to public high school. And I had an English teacher who basically said, you can borrow my typewriter. And I had a whiteout. You remember the whiteout bottle?
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't have a college counselor. I didn't have, now I think about how hard it is to get into college. And I literally tapped and whited out my essays and mailed them in. And it was like, you're going to go to Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. I had this faux uncle who was the most accomplished Chinese man in our community. He had a PhD from Caltech. He was a civil engineer. And he used to take me to lunch or dinner once a week. We realize now that he had a coupon at Sizzler where kids eat free. Like, this was not like out of the generosity of his heart. But he said,
That's
if you get into Harvard, I will pay for all 4 years.
Wow.
I was like, yeah, but not Yale or Princeton, by the way. It wasn't like,
right. It was not like Harvard. Right. It was not an all-inclusive deal there.
So, and, I went on scholarships and I went on, 6 jobs. I paid my way through Yale. But I didn't get into Harvard, but I got into Yale. And I got into a bunch of other places that were fabulous. And anyone would be lucky to get into like Stanford and Princeton, all those places.
Yeah.
And I remember my parents, which they didn't know what a college visit was. This is 1996 now, right? So now we're in the spring of 96 and I've turned 16. There's no college visit. And my mom literally said, who did you like in the interviews? Who was the person you liked the most in the interview process? Because that's the only thing we have to go on. Nobody in our community has ever gone to an Ivy League college. And I remember the only person of color I met was my Yale interviewer, a Black man who worked at Lockheed Martin. And I was like, he's the only person who understood me, I think, at a level that I felt like I'd want to emulate him and the way he talked about giving back and the New Haven community. So it was down to like Yale, Princeton, and Stanford. And I was like, I like the Yale person the most. Like, he has a similar background to me. He talked about how Yale would change his life, that all these opportunities he didn't know existed. He did not grow up wealthy. And I said, I'm going to go to Yale. And the first time I ever saw the East Coast was when my mom dropped me off in New Haven with 2 suitcases. I didn't even have a winter coat. And she got back on the plane and flew back to California, literally dropped me off. And so I went from a tiny town in Southern California to New Haven. And I would say, talk about reinvention, Kathi. It changed my life. It opened doors that I did not know existed. And I'm a person with a tremendous amount of passionate curiosity. Yeah. And so being able to go to a place where any path was possible, I got 3 degrees, right? I didn't just settle on one. I got 3 degrees. I joined every club. I was like, ran for Yale College Council the first day I got there as a freshman, right? I really participated because if you grow up in Fontana, California, your options and your worldview is so limited. So being placed at 16 years old in an environment where everything was possible, I completely maximized the 4 years that I spent there.
I love that you just emphasized the engagement and the involvement that you had. And it reminds me of something that I was told when I was in college, that the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And I think you are so indicative. What you just said is so indicative of that experience. And I just remember, people who would sort of sit on the sidelines or not want to get involved, or thought they were too cool to join a club or too cool to join a sorority or whatever it might have been. And yet those who were thriving were those who dared to sort of engage in something, because that's where friendships were formed. That's where education and content in your life was created. And, I just love that you just shared how much you leaned into that and clearly what it did for you.
Well, I mean, Kathi, Yoshiko, one of my closest friends from college, she's on the Zoom right now. And we've known each other for, I want to say 24 years. And I think that is an indicator of friendship, right? Like the people that you meet and come across, they're people that you'll have for the rest of your life. So what I will say though, which I probably if there's nothing that I would do differently about that period of time in my life. And I wish that I had been able to clone myself so I could like do more, take more classes, join more things.
Yeah.
There's like, someone once asked me, like, you know, you look at that huge Yale, you know, curriculum and you're like, oh my God, the thousands of classes I didn't get to take.
I know. And as an adult, I think we have this thirst and this desire even more so because we don't have to. I mean, at this phase in our lives where we would just love that opportunity again to just learn and be sort of open to all of that. So let me fast forward a little bit. You joined McKinsey, and when you were there, and tell me if there's a before story or an after by all means. But, you know, that's a very different world than where you are today.
Yeah. Well, I would say, you know, I took the MCAT, the LSAT, the GMAT, and the GRE. I mean, I think my mom was a tiger mom before tiger moms were a thing. She was like, see, I was right. Someone write a book about me. And I actually didn't know what consulting was. I'd gotten into med school and law school. And this is back when consulting firms used to do spring recruiting. They don't do it anymore. They now only recruit in the fall. And someone said, oh, well, there's this thing called consulting. If you're going to defer going to graduate school, there's this other thing you could do. And I, again, did not know what it was. And I just like submitted my resume. And I feel like it does feel like you're winning the Willy Wonka golden ticket every single time. Through the process, I interviewed with McKinsey, BCG, Bain, Monitor. I interviewed with all the big firms. And I remember my McKinsey interviews stood out because the first interview I had, he looked at my resume and he balled it up and threw it into the garbage. And he said, you all look the same to me. Okay, you all have the same grades. You all are equally as qualified. But I have to spend 4 days a week with my team. So I'd have to spend 4 days a week with you, spend more time with you than I do with my family. I want to know if you're the type of person who I want to be in the foxhole with. And we spent 30 minutes. He didn't make me do the case study. He didn't make me do the like how many balls of string to go around the world. And then my final interview with McKinsey, this amazing managing director, he came in and he put his glass of water down and he said, impact. We're all about making a difference. And so tell me about, wait, did we lose?
No, we're good.
Okay, sorry. Sorry, we've lost power in the factory today. And so we've like jerry-rigged it to like make it work.
We're good.
But he just said, I just want to talk about impact. That's all I want to talk about. And of all the consulting firms, I sort of said, McKinsey's where I want to be. Because again, I found people I wanted to emulate who shared similar values. And I didn't know what I was in for. I spent over 11 years there. Thank goodness for these genetics, because 11 years is a long time to stay at a firm where the average tenure is 24 months. And I got very lucky. There was a little bit of a economic downturn, if some of you remember, in 2001, 2002.
Yeah.
And I was the only analyst that stayed out of that downturn. And I went direct to associate. I didn't go back to business school. I think they just needed to keep someone around to do the real work, right? If 11 out of 12 people in your class are going back to school or going to a next job because of the economy, they needed to keep someone. I was the only Asian person, by the way, in my 12-person class. And I feel like the Asian woman, she'll do the model.
Oh,
she'll stay up till 4 a.m. and do the financial modeling. But I often say that going direct to associate, what was great about that is at that point, I had the flexibility to do what I wanted. And what I wanted to do, most of my life, I have not been a classic fit model size. I have been everything from a size 12 to a 22. And I realized the transformative power that fashion and beauty could have in someone's life. And so I wanted to be in those types of categories, ones that I hadn't been able to participate in because I wasn't the perfect size, and ones that I felt like I had gravitated towards because they made a difference in how I felt about myself. Yeah. So I became one of the global leaders of the practice. And there's no place in the world where in your 20s and 30s, they let you spend time with the world's leading executives and thinkers and solve incredible problems in compressed timeframes. But more than anything, I love client service. I loved helping other people succeed. I love mentorship and being mentored. I mean, McKinsey is a very tough place in terms of having really tough coaches, but that's because they care, right? Your toughest coach is the one that cares to give you the feedback. But I would say that 11 and a half years really positioned me to know what I wanted to do next, because
So what
such
was
a breadth
that?
of experiences.
Yeah. I mean, and what was that catalyst moment where you said, okay, now is the time, and that leaping off point? I mean, that takes a lot of confidence. It involves a lot of risk. You were so well educated and so well versed in, you know, what a spreadsheet looks like. I always have this expression where I say, just because you can make a great meatball doesn't mean you should run a restaurant. You know, those are two very different skill sets. And it's how often does someone say, oh, I just, you know, I love your cooking, you should open a restaurant? Well, no, probably not. Very few people should. So how did you go from this idea of what the need was in the world to going, yeah, I need to really create this?
Well, I will say I took 11 months of paid leave. So for
Okay.
every year you've been at the firm, you earn a month of paid leave. And I didn't know that that existed. And frankly, I was at a crossroads at McKinsey around not making senior. I did not make partner. You know, it was sort of like another couple of years of doing this grind. And so I basically took 11 months of paid leave. And I always say it's a gift in life when you can hit the pause button, when you have that flexibility to do that.
Yeah.
And in those 11 months, I went around the world with all the points and miles that I had accumulated and never used. I worked on a startup. That's how Marcy and I know each other. And that did not turn out the way we thought it would. And the last 2 months of my holiday that I was taking off, I went to visit my parents in Taiwan. And I always say that my mom held it in really well for a good month and a half. And the last 2 weeks I was there, we were having dinner and she said, Lisa, you cannot live at home. I'm a Gen Xer, by the way. I'm not a millennial. So
Right.
you go back McKinsey, you find new job. I was like, well, you know, I've saved up some money. And I have this napkin. I had read the Walter Isaacson Steve Jobs biography. And I had listened to that Stanford commencement speech around connecting the dots of your life. And I had put these little dots of my life on a napkin on a beach in Greece. I was like, I'm just going to write out all the dots of my life. And I pull out this napkin. Napkin is not job. You start company, right?
Oh,
And with the 12-hour time difference between Taiwan and New York, I woke up the next morning with emails in my inbox. My lawyer, your mom, called me and says, you're starting a company. What's the name of the company? My accountant, here's your operating documents and your tax ID paperwork. Your mom says you're starting a company.
wow.
And I walked into the breakfast room and I said, Mom, what did you do last night? And she said, you'll not have guts. I have guts. I go on the internet. I start company last night. And so that's October 12th, 2012. I have all the documents from that. I love it. I love the clapping from Marvin on the Zoom.
That's great.
So when people say, why'd you start a company? I said, my mom told me so. My mom told me to do it.
I love that.
But I often tell people that really the calculus that I did was when you start a company, you're solving for resources, money, and people, right? You're solving for know-how in terms of, do I know this industry? Do I know how to do this? And you're solving, you're solving for people, money, and know-how. And what was great about this is, from a people standpoint, I had enough people in the fashion world that I could go to and ask for help in starting this. From a money standpoint, I used my life savings to start the company. And so I didn't have to raise it. I didn't have to write a business plan because I wrote a 5-page Word document with a financial model, but I wasn't pitching anyone to give me money. And then from a know-how, I would say I only knew 50% of what it would take. I don't think McKinsey prepared me to be an operator. My parents prepared me to be an operator. McKinsey gave me the network and enough knowledge to be dangerous. I would say a consultant, as much as I respect the profession and got so much out of it, actually executing an idea takes so much more than writing it on a PowerPoint slide and coming up with the idea. And then the other 50% I've solved with unbelievable people in this industry who have considered me their like daughter or their niece, because mostly Chinese people in the garment district, and have taken me under their wing. And I will never know as much as they know about production, but they've taught me for the last 8 years what it takes to build a company, which is not fancy, by the way. 20% of what you see about a fashion company, the runway show, the photo shoot, all of that, that makes us all feel good. All the press, the 80 press features, it makes 80% is inventory, supply chain, working capital, people management. And I felt that firsthand in the pandemic. When that all falls apart, you realize that that 20% sizzle of running a fashion company isn't enough to power continued growth, or even just staying, it's existing. I mean, Kathi, what did I tell you when we got on the phone for the prep call? I said, we're still standing.
I know.
My accomplishment is we're still standing.
But
hardest hit during the pandemic, women's workwear. No one's going to an office.
I know. And before we get into that really quickly, I just want to take sort of my own perspective of what I got to experience with GRAVITAS in those early days. And I have a closet full of probably, I don't know, 8, 10 dresses and jackets. And every time I went to New York, I was like, Lisa, I need to come by. And I would walk into the offices. And, when she talks about the hard work and the lack of glamour, like I'd walk in, first of all, your team, you have the most extraordinary team that have worked around you. And I know that these people just adore and love and would do so much for you, not just because it was great and it was fashion, but because of who you were and also what you were building. And truly, not to overuse the word, but the gravitas of what you were creating for the people out there. But your brand really stands for something and always has. And the confidence that you have given women to put on a dress that has, like, if you ever had, and I mean, literally, this is like, if, we hear this expression, if I could come up with the perfect dress, if I could envision every feature, whether it was from the zipper to the way it holds me in, to the length, to the cut. I mean, Lisa nailed it with what she was doing. And that is why I think from the get-go, it just resonated for so many women. And I think, if I wasn't there, but if I remember correctly, there was sort of a show that you did in the very beginning that was in a gallery, and you had your dresses on display, and you just you showed up in such a different way than other people. You dared to think out of the box. You dared to really understand who your consumer was and what they needed. And you filled a void in the space that just didn't exist, with the most gorgeous line, the most incredible fabrics, the best cuts. And you nailed it from the very beginning.
But Kathi, it's also because incredible women like you showed up for us, right? I remember even we did a pop-up in LA at the W, and
right.
You rolled in on Saturday, and we didn't have proper fitting rooms. And you're like, that's fine. I'll just get undressed in this suite and I'll try on everything you have. And you're like, ship it all to me. But I would say that was what has defined what we get up in the morning for, is we have deep compassion and empathy for the women we serve, myself included, right? Like half of the problems we're solving are problems I'm solving for myself. But we were really lucky early on in that my team, and they're trying to solve the power problem in a factory right now. Our head designer, Aruk, who you saw on Saturday, he will sit inside the mind of a woman and he'll say, oh yeah, she never wants to be on the end of a photo because her arm will look fat. I'm going to give her a cape. He literally sits inside there and has empathy, but then will take action to try to solve problems for women and make their lives better. Because we are interviewing every day for a job to perform in your life, right? And I think that's what defines, we're not just, you can go to any department store, any retailer, and buy 200 dresses today, 30% off. Why do you make the leap to us? I think functionally we are solving problems, and then emotionally we're giving people, it's like Dumbo did not need a feather to fly, but it reminded him that he could. We're that extra boost that says, when you look in the mirror, you should pay yourself a compliment. You should channel your superpower. You can step out and take on the day. The clothing is not magical, but I think the message and the way we build product makes women have a feeling. You have the word gravitas literally emblazoned on your back in a label, right? It's like, I have the word confidence on my back.
Like you feel it, you just know it. And it's so true. Now, We touched on what happened during COVID for a nanosecond, but I really do want to take a moment because I think that speaks so to the spirit of who you are, how you leaned into what was going on at the time, and maybe share with us sort of what that was like for you. I mean, you know, clearly we've all had very different experiences over the last couple of years, but share a little bit about what you as a company really had to deal with.
Yeah,
And what you
so
got to do.
one of the things that I'm most proud of is September of 2019, we did our first New York Fashion Week runway show. And it was this high point for us in terms of retailer enthusiasm, press enthusiasm. And I love to say that we did our show our way, which is every size. We had 0 to 26W on the runway. By the way, we were size inclusive before it was cool to be inclusive. If you remember, Kathy, we went up to size
1,000%. Oh my goodness. Yes.
And you know, having formerly been a size 22, it was really important for people, for people to be seen when they come to our website, when they come. We're the first brand at Lord & Taylor before they went bankrupt to merchandise 0 to 28W in the same section. You know, they usually have that plus size section on a higher floor. We were the first brand to ever be all sizes in one place so everyone could shop together. So we did this Fashion Week runway show where it was every ethnicity, models who were age 18 to 46, and every size, from 0 all the way to 22W on the runway. I was so proud of our team. And, you know, you look at how big my smile was when we got to take our bow with my head designer. And then we were basically taking orders. We had this unbelievable 2020 planned. We were going to launch in China. There were all these things we were going to do. And then March of 2020, our sales were not just 0, they were negative. People sent back clothes. We have a 30-day return policy. So they sent back clothes they weren't going to wear to an event, to the office, to the conference. And who wants to buy a $300 dress for work, right? Yeah. I also, by the way, resisted the impulse to make sweatpants because I was like, that's not on brand for us. We did not make sweatpants, and we made other things. So I get a phone call from one of our advisors, and he said, Mount Sinai Hospital needs hospital gowns. Do you have the ability to make hospital gowns? And we still have 3 factories in China. And we said, yes, we can get you hospital gowns and get them through customs and not price gouge you. We can do that at cost. And then he said, okay, and then here's all these ex-McKinsey people who are now CEOs of companies, and they need face masks, like HelloFresh, if you're familiar with the meal delivery service.
Absolutely, yeah.
They ordered 2,500 face masks from us for their New Jersey location. Every single ex-McKinsey person, I just literally was amazed. The Today Show called us and said, we need 50 face masks for our producers and cameramen who are still coming into 30 Rock. And I just put on Facebook, you know, we're going back to work. April 3rd, 2020, we're going to reopen our New York City factory, and we're going to reopen our factories in China. And I always say we pivoted with purpose. There was no profit. You know, the gross margin on a dress versus the gross margin on a hospital gown are incredibly different. But what can we do to keep the lights on, keep people employed? My workers that work in this factory, they cannot work from home. The garment district went from 10 to 15,000 workers to less than 6,000 because they can't work from home. And so we spent 72 days basically making hospital gowns and face masks. I was walking to and from work, an hour each direction, and we were able to keep everyone together.
Unbelievable. I mean, it's just incredible when you're able to do something like that. And you gave so much hope to your employees and to the staff that were working for you. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing when you can do that for your team and keep them engaged.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I gave a talk last week in New York, and my head designer got to come with me. And I usually show a slide of the 2 of us in the office on April 6th of 2020. And Starbucks had not reopened. There was like a joyous sound of excitement in my office when the Starbucks reopened at the end of April on our block. But there was nothing. It was desolate. The streets were empty. It was a very scary time. We were the only people walking into our building. And I gave him a huge shout out. And what he said in response was, actually, I'm not sure where my next paycheck would have come from other than going on unemployment if you hadn't done this. So we were really in it together, because I basically on stage said, I cannot be more grateful for people like Aruk, my head designer, who hand cut 10,000 face masks, literally hand cut 10,000 face masks in a day. And afterwards he came up to me and he said, well, actually, I'm really happy I still had a paycheck. I'm really happy that I could like support my life. And it extended to when New York City started offering vaccinations in January and February of last year. Most of the garment district, the workers do not speak English. They do not have computers. They do not have access to the websites. And so we set up computers in our conference room. And at lunchtime, the workers would come with their driver's license and we would book their vaccine appointments. So I would say I feel incredibly lucky now to be part of the garment district. I don't think I felt this closely connected to my neighborhood until the pandemic. And it's far, I know you work with a lot of restaurants, it's farm to table, but in the fashion industry, right? Like I can tell you exactly who sewed that stitch. And the $18 an hour she makes, I know the family members she's going to feed. I know the shops that she's going to keep in business because of that $18 an hour.
That's an extraordinary thing to be able to say. And what is the what is sort of the place that Gravitas is in now as the world is starting to come back a little and women are returning to their offices and to their workplace? And has there ever been talk about what you could do for men and any products for men? I never really asked you that question. I'm kind of curious.
Well, I always say you can't design for those you don't understand. So I'm not sure I fully understand men, but talk about reinvention. So what we did last year is we reinvented the business under 3 different pillars. Pillar 1 is the Gravitas main label for women like yourself, Kathi, like so many women we serve. And that brand, I think, has evolved quite a bit. I think from a fashion standpoint, we're much looser silhouettes. We are, absolutely honoring the fact that almost every one of my repeat customers is 1 to 2 sizes bigger than she was before the pandemic. So I know when people are going back to an office, when they order a pair of pants, the same pants they owned before the pandemic, but in 1 size bigger. I also think half of the assortment for Gravitas's main label is now layered with meaning. So it's either made in New York and we include a card of the person who sewed it, or there's purpose. Like I on purpose wore this dress. This is our first ever Year of the Tiger collection. And I think we're really owning that 90% of our team is of Asian descent and 10% of the profits from this garment went to stop AAPI hate. We had 2 hate crimes happen to our team last March. And so for the first time ever, our brand took a stand on anti-Asian American hate. We raised money for what we call Choose Compassion campaign. But I would say the changes in that brand are often related to how women are really living. So from a silhouette standpoint, layering it with meaning and a different supply chain, right? Making transparent the zero waste we create by making things in New York. It is very farm to table. That's the best analogy I can make.
Amazing.
The second part of the business, we have a factory. And so now we're making clothes for hotels. So I do make men's clothing, by the way. So we redesigned the uniforms for the Hilton hotels in New York. We make fire department uniforms. We make New York Police Department. We make uniforms. We make products for other brands. You got to keep them busy. If Gravitas isn't going to pull its weight, we've got to actually find other places for it to produce. So we've become a. One second, I'm just going to close my door.
No problem. It's a factory.
Here.
It's a factory in full motion. Well, we love that.
The electrician is here to fix our power problems. I think what we've done is we've said, if you are a mid-sized brand or if you are a company that's looking for products made in New York or in China, we are here for you. And I think that is what we learned from making hospital gowns and face masks, that our superpower is that we can manufacture. And we do it at a really high quality level. And then the third, which I mentioned to you, Kathi, is we've launched a whole content. So we sold our book earlier this year. We've got a whole bunch of content because during the pandemic, like yourself, we realized the unmet need around helping women feel their best. And that's something that we've learned a lot about. Thousands of hours in fitting rooms. I always say the fitting room is possibly the most vulnerable place a woman can go. Semi-naked, all your insecurities exposed.
The worst lighting. Ever.
And I have been there. I've been there with you in the fitting room, Kathi, right? So all of the conversations that we've had in fitting rooms with women, thousands of hours, we've been able to compile that into a set of insights from a content standpoint.
And
so those are the three parts.
Tell me the name of the book.
Well, it's a working subtitle. The main title is Gravitas, but the book proposal, it was Choose Self-Confidence, Discover Your Superpower, and Lead from Within. But that will probably change through the editing process.
It's incredible. But you're out on the road. You're doing speaking engagements. You're being, sort of brought in to inspire and probably educate on a number of levels, people all over the country. And I know that you're juggling everything you just said with, hopping off and on airplanes and doing some incredible speaking. Is that the topic that you're most focused on, and sort of creating and empowering women with the level of confidence, which you've always done through Gravitas, but sort of, are you leaning into that content in a deeper way?
And what's fun is it's women and men. I just came back from an event in Phoenix, which was 400 people, and men and women 50-50. And so I think this whole idea of making the choice, the content we talk about is kids are born fully self-confident, right? Ask any kid what they're the best at in the world, and they'll tell you. And then we lose that. We let self-doubt creep in, and we make that choice to self-confidence. And we have to begin to actively make the unconscious conscious around what we're the best at in the world all over again.
Right.
And so we are teaching people the way in which we think about confidence and the way we think about gravitas. I think that's where the content component of our business has evolved. Is I think people really felt like we understood the deeply felt sense of doubt that many of us have. It is a healthy self-doubt when managed correctly.
Yes.
But I will say that content part is the hardest part for me, simply because we make so many mistakes as a team. I make so many mistakes as a leader. And so running the first two parts of my business, sometimes I get on stage and share what we've learned, and I have to tell the audience, it all looks better in a PowerPoint. It all looks better on a stage in 45 minutes. Let me tell you how many mistakes I made today. Let me tell you that I have to run payroll next week when I get back to the office. And so I think that humility that we're trying to bring hopefully connects with people.
Right. Which I love, because I think there's a reality to it. And I think you're right. I mean, how many people say, look at your life, it's so fabulous. Like, well, yeah, but I'm the one that's up till 2:00 in the morning working. Even though my life might look fabulous, in terms of what I'm doing, it takes hard work. But when you do what you love and you are affecting and impacting so many people and doing it with purpose, there's so much to be proud of. There's so much that actually inspires us and gives us the energy to work that hard.
Well, and I would say, I love your theme around reinvention, right? So personally, I've certainly reinvented myself multiple times, whether it was, being able to be a consultant, or wanting to be a doctor or a lawyer, becoming a consultant, and now running a fashion business. But I would say what I think has been the best but toughest lesson to learn in running this company is the 5-page business plan I wrote in 2012. This company has reinvented itself so many times. And in the last 2 years, it's really out of necessity, right? I don't want anyone to come away with this thinking that, we are hugely successful from a numbers standpoint. Our core business was 80% down in 2020. It was 30% down in 2021. And so the reinvention really came out of a sense of needing to keep the lights on. But it all looks better on social media.
But I will say that is actually, it's such an interesting topic that you touch on, because people often think that, reinvention is out of opportunity, and it can be, but reinvention out of necessity is a very, very powerful way to look at your life. And when you can sit back, and it's sometimes harder to see the opportunity when you're in a place that is being very challenged. It gets to you emotionally, it gets to you on so many levels that it's hard to feel really optimistic and positive about what else you can do or create or be. And so I love that you really touched on that.
It's for us, at least I can speak for myself, not the rest of my team. It's been very ugly and messy. And I'll be the first to admit that it's an ugly, messy reinvention, and it does not look pretty, even on paper.
Yeah.
I've presented these 3 pillars of our future business as if they're perfectly, polished, as a McKinsey person would, a former McKinsey person would, but it's very ugly and it's very messy, and there are a lot of things we don't know, that we're just trying for the first time. But what I do feel really good about is that the mission is still there. The North Star is still there, right? Which is around helping others feel confident and being there for them in the moments when they most need us. But I wish the reinvention were like a cocoon and a butterfly. I really wish it was the metamorphosis was as beautiful. But I'm really proud of my team. I'm really proud of the people I get to work with. We were talking today at lunchtime about one of our angel investors. I was almost ashamed to walk through the numbers with this person.
Yeah.
And I burst into tears at the end of walking this person through the numbers, because they said, I can't believe you're still in business. Like, I can't believe the things you had to do. And he said, I'm really proud of you. And I'm like a firstborn, good Chinese daughter. And I'm like, somebody said they're proud of me, because there's no gold stars or blue ribbons after you graduate from school. Right. So it was the nicest thing he could have said to me. So I said that to my team today. I said, this person is proud of us, even though the numbers don't play out the way they should have. Yeah. And he goes, that's because we trust each other.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? He's like, we make mistakes, but I trust you, Lisa. Like, I know you're going to do what you say. It may not happen on the time frame that I want it to happen on,
right?
But it'll eventually happen. You say things and you do them. Like, eventually they'll happen.
Yeah.
So.
And I think, look, so many people can relate to what you're saying. So many people have gone through some very serious challenges, personal, business, in different parts of their lives in the last 2 years. And I think the message in this is it's okay. Like, don't be hard on yourself. Give yourself the grace to know and understand that we have all been through a really challenging couple of years. But sit back, look at what you just said, your North Star. What is it? And be true to yourself. And it might mean that you are going to do something completely different with your life. It might mean you are going to reinvent one piece of your business or your personal life or your aspirations. And it's such an important thing. I talk a lot in the book about leaning back and pausing and just listening to ourselves. As a chapter, the whole chapter is called, Hello, Are You Still In There? Like, just take a moment to reflect on where we're at, who you are, who you want to be. If you've been doing things by, somebody else's book, or are you doing them by your own book? And figure out what you want to be doing and where you're going, and start to rebuild and start to recreate, start to reinvent, because that's the opportunity that so many of us have, if you can just sort of allow yourself that grace.
I think it's that. I love that, Kathi. And it's also, we do an exercise, and I think I always say, if you look up the word pivot in the dictionary, look up the noun, it has nothing to do with the change in direction. Yeah. It's actually about the central point on which you turn. Mm-hmm. And so recognizing the strength of that central point, and our team is really good at acknowledging what we're the best at. We always come back to our strengths, because I said to them, if we're going to be a speedboat and not an aircraft carrier, then we need a lot of gas in the tank. And so we spend a lot of time, and I feel like in that reflection, when you're reinventing your life, coming back to, what am I really awesome at? And how can that be deployed into the world? When you ask us, how did you make hospital gowns and face masks? I'm like, we're the best at making things. We will figure out how to find the fabric, how to find the sewers, how to, get people into the city when no one wants to come here to sew. Like, we're the best at that. And so being able to pivot in that way had nothing to do about, we're going here now. It was around, what do we know we have? What resources do we have? And let's maximize them to make a difference for other people. And I think in reinvention, I know that's something you think a lot about,
huge.
Is your core
huge.
assets, your distinctive strengths. Nobody else in the world can do this. How do you want to redeploy them now?
It's spot on, and just truly appreciate you just punctuating that. It's such an important thing to really allow yourself to listen and hone in on that. I would love to invite, we only have a few moments left. And what I'm going to do is sign off for our podcast listeners. I want to thank everybody. So don't go anywhere, anybody else. But I just want to say thank you to those who have tuned into the podcast today. We are inviting you to always come to the Reinvention Exchange, to follow the virtual chats, to follow the podcast, follow the content, the blogs, access lots of inspiring information at the reinventionexchange.com. I thank you all for tuning in and look forward to you joining us again next week. And everything about where and how to follow Gravitas and Lisa Sun will be in the show notes. So happy reinventing to you, and thank you. And we are going to continue, just in case anybody has any questions. I know that typically we have a few people who love to raise their hand and may have a question, and I'm going to guess Marvin, you are one of those. And we only have a few minutes, guys, so I'm sorry if we can just let Lisa go one time today, but go for it, Marvin. Thank you.
Lisa, your strength, your strong, kind, resilient, fearless message in your website is brilliant. So many things, but I know we're in an abbreviated time frame. You have such a connection to people, and Mackenzie is a great landing place and everything else. For somebody that has the energy you do, there's people that live in a way of needing help, and there's people that live in a way of always supporting others. How do you find the next Lisa and take the person that's always asking for help, that has the same energy and energetic side of you, and turn them into a you?
Wow, that's a big question. That's a big question, Marvin. If I understand your question, which is in the how do I inspire people to take action? Is that right? Or how do I inspire people to?
Well, how do you transform Mother Teresa into the CEO is a better way to say it.
How do you transform Mother Teresa? Well, they may never want to be the CEO. This is not a fun job, Kathi, right? It's not.
I was going to say, but I will say, and I think if this kind of steers the course on that question, I think that you set the example. And I think that your team look to you in so much that you do and say, wow, if I can just be a fraction of what she is, or function at a fraction of how she does, I am going to be a better person for it. I am, and I think you inspire that in your people around you.
I will give you an example of this, which is, I always say that what we can do for others is encourage them to raise their hand when they may have been stuck or paralyzed to do so. So I'll give you a very clear example. During the pandemic, I put on LinkedIn, hey, we're doing this thing. We're just going to start making PPE. Don't know how to do it. Don't know what to do. Just going to do it. And what was unbelievable is there were a ton of people stuck at home, often with their college age kids stuck with them.
Yeah.
And one of my former clients, this amazing woman, Bonnie, she messaged me on LinkedIn and said, I'm stuck at home with my college age kids. I have a car and I'm willing to help you if you need this car. And she drove me and a bunch of fabric from a warehouse to our office 3 times. And that was her way of feeling like she could make a difference, right? She was sort of like, I can at least raise my hand because I know how hard you're working. So to your point, Kathi, the example, but you may not have to do what I do to make a difference, but you may say, I always say, as opposed to how can I help? If you know your resources and your superpower, saying, here's how I can help. Like, I had not even thought of Bonnie having a car because I don't have a car in the city.
Right.
Like, it's just not even in my equation, and Uber wasn't working. But she was like, what do I have that Lisa might need?
Yeah.
And let me raise my hand and give it to her.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I've answered your question, but I've been really inspired by people like that, who are like, this is what I've got, Lisa. If it helps you at all, please let me.
But you created the space for them to be able to raise their hand. And sometimes we don't realize that we're doing that for other people, and what that gave her, the gift that gave for her to be able to partake, which is a pretty amazing thing. And I think sometimes we take for granted just who we are and how we function in our world when we are doing and building and going, and others around us are watching what we're doing, and we take for granted what we do or who we are.
Kathi, one of the things that I love is the network is only as strong as much as you use it. So I'm always the first person to give back to the network, but I've learned that when I ask for help, the person wants to be my white knight and they feel that much more connected to me. Like,
right?
When Kathi, I said, I would do anything for you, Kathi. And I know the same is true in reverse.
100%.
And that makes us more connected. We're that much more connected because of that.
Yeah. Thank you, Marvin. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Sally, Ronnie, any of our new friends on here today? Any questions that you want to ask? And if not, we are on the hour of 3:30 here in LA. I so appreciate, Lisa, your time, your insights, all that you are doing, every dress in my closet. I'm so excited to be wearing again. The most exciting part of it. I cannot wait to see what's next and just play in the world with you in all that you are doing. And I love that I actually got to see you for a moment in New York this weekend.
Oh, that was so great.
Such a treat. So I want to just thank you again for just being here as my guest today on the Reinvention Virtual Chat and the podcast.
Well, Kathi, thank you. I mean, if you all know this because you all know Kathi, but you definitely walk the talk. I feel the power of the sisterhood in knowing you and working with you.
I appreciate that.
And we have more sisters that have joined us, like Cricket and whatnot.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Great people find other great people.
For sure. All right. Best of everything to you. Everybody have a beautiful couple of weeks till we reconnect again on here. And a happy reinventing. Go out there and just make it happen for yourself. Lots of love and hugs, and have a wonderful day. Thanks,
This was
everybody.
fabulous.
Thank you, Sally. Thanks, Lisa. Big hugs.
Bye.
Bye-bye.